Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so honored to have you all here tonight, and I am the luckiest girl on the planet because I get to introduce these two fabulous authors. So first, I'm going to introduce Lisa. Lisa Scottoline is the New York Times best-selling author and Edgar Award-winning author of 33 novels, including her latest, Eternal, her first historical fiction book. Oh my God, it's amazing. So welcome, Lisa. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Now for our main event. Chris Bohjalian is the #1 New York Times best-selling author of over 22 books. His work has been translated into 35 languages and become 3 movies and a TV series. But more than that, Chris is one of the most beloved authors at RJ Julia Booksellers. We are honored to have him here tonight, honored to have the launch event. He is so good to us. We adore him. He is the nicest, most wonderful man on the planet. And the book, Hour of the Witch, oh my gosh. One of the most amazing books I've read thus far this year. So, Chris Bohjalian, welcome. Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, this is just an amazing honor for me, Chris. You know that I love and adore this book. I am so thrilled to be on the cover. Absolutely riveting historical fiction that reads like the most page-turning of thrillers. It's so true, and we'll talk more about why. But I just wanted to say congratulations. As a book lover, as a fan of yours, but this is really just one of the best novels I've read in my life. And I cannot recommend it more highly. And we'll talk about how you produce this incredible work of art. But thanks for having me and congrats.
Oh, Lisa, I want to thank you so much for being here because heaven knows I loved every page of Eternal. Oh my God, this is just historical fiction that is brilliant, poignant. I cared so much about these 3 young adults, and thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Well, thank you. And you can see Chris is so generous, but tonight is going to be about him. I'm going to try to make him do it. What I love when I open any novel is what assignment did this author give him or herself? And you get extra points if it's a really tough one. And this is one of the toughest. How would you start? Because there's so many twists and turns in this book that I don't want to reveal anything, but the premise is knockout, in my opinion.
Thank you. I've always been obsessed by Puritan theology. Imagine a world where Satan is as real as your neighbor. Imagine a world where every moment you're wondering, am I saved or am I damned? Now, whenever we think of witch hunts in America, we go right to 1692, Salem. And I didn't want to write another Salem book because there have been so many amazing Salem books. But I came across a 3-line reference in Boston's Court of Assistance, 1672, the first divorce in North America for domestic violence.
Incredible.
Elizabeth Nanny Naylor successfully sued her husband for divorce on the grounds of cruelty. So I went down 2 parallel rabbit holes. The first rabbit hole was divorce. In the 17th century, 31 couples divorced in Boston. And there were 5 reasons you could divorce: polygamy, desertion, adultery, and you will love this when we think of the Puritans, impotence, and one time for cruelty. And that was the first rabbit hole. Imagine being a young woman and going before this 14-member all-male jury and saying, I'm married to a beast. I want out. And this is 350 years before #I believe her.
Right.
So that was
Right.
the first rabbit hole. The second rabbit hole was witchcraft. 30 years before Salem, Hartford was hanging witches. In 1656, the governor of Massachusetts had his own sister-in-law, Anne Hibbins, hanged as a witch. And so these two parallel rabbit holes merged and became Hour of the Witch, a novel about a young woman in a toxic marriage who, in her attempt to get out, winds up in the midst of a witch hunt.
Yeah, it's so remarkable. I mean, it does everything that a good novel should do, but I think particularly historical fiction, in that it gives you the scope of this cosmos where God is real and devil is real, but also that it also is, so it's writ large, but it's also writ small. Because let's talk about Mary Deerfield, who's a 24-year-old. She's beautiful, but she's not prideful. You know, you really got us right away. And what I love about this book is it starts right off. Like, you know, right away, she is in trouble. She is constrained by her society, but at the same time, will stand up for herself in this quiet, moral way. How did you come up with such a terrific, strong, but realistic character? It's set in a time when women weren't expected to be strong or anything.
You know, if you wanted to be hanged as a witch, you needed to be smart, strong, and opinionated. That was a trifecta
Oh, no.
that got a noose around your neck. Once, you know, when I was researching this book, I'm in Salem, and a docent says to me the worst joke ever. He says, "How many women were burned as witches?" Answer, "None. We hanged them." Ha 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 ha. It's a horrible joke.
Right. Yeah.
But it gets at something important. He doesn't say how many people. He says how many women. Now, there were, I think, in the 17th century altogether, 3 men tried as witches, one of whom would die. But the reality is that this was a patriarchal society, and that they were determined to keep women in their religious place. So when I'm creating Mary Deerfield, I knew she was going to be smart. I knew she was going to be strong. And I knew she was going to be opinionated. But I also knew this. I don't want to throw everything about the Puritans under the bus, because there were people like Anne Bradstreet, America's first poet, a remarkable writer. Dost thou dream of things beyond the moon? Dost thou hope to dwell there soon? She lived in the 17th century. Yeah, that's the epigraph.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
And she wrote wrenching poems about the death of a grandchild, the demise of her library in a fire, her deep personal religious doubts, her passionate, really passionate love for her husband. So when I was creating the voice for Mary Deerfield, I always went back first to Anne Bradstreet and then to Anne Hutchinson, an antinomian, not hanged, but exiled to Rhode Island because she was a midwife and she was smart, strong, and opinionated.
Yeah, it's remarkable, really, when you think about, because when you read the novel, and I read one of your interviews, and you're talking about the feeling of dread, because as soon as you get this premise, a woman in this incredibly structured, oppressive society, and as soon as you realize that she is being abused and she is going to try to do something about it, your heart is in your throat. for 350 pages, however long. He's like, please don't, and that she stands up for herself. Now let's talk for a second, because I think something else she did really well. And you don't feel like she's Lily White. It's not like she, she is a real character. She feels like a young girl. She has sexuality. She tries to reach out to people. She is unique. And it's very interesting vis-a-vis Thomas Deerfield, because her husband, because I think you made him not the stereotypical villain. I mean, we understand, and you want to talk about that, because that, talk about an assignment that a writer gives himself. That is a tough assignment, and you succeeded so beautifully.
Thank you. And I got to tell you, you succeeded equally as beautifully in Eternal. There are so many characters in Eternal who you can see their transformation from characters you think you're not going to like to understanding their complexity, which is just wonderful.
Thank you. So
Thomas Deerfield, Mary's husband, it would have been easy to make him absolutely evil.
Right.
And he's pretty evil. He's not a good guy, but he believes in his heart that he's looking out for his wife. And he does it in ways that are obscene, that are cruel beyond belief. But it goes back to that Puritan notion of predestination and his patriarchal belief that he's beating her for her own good, which is just stultifyingly horrific.
Right.
But in 1662, he is able to rationalize his behavior. And I'm sure that I know that in 2021, the world is filled with abusive men who rationalize their behavior. And I think it's one of the other surprising parallels between a novel set in 1662 Boston and one set in the 1930s and 1940s in Rome. And that is the sense of their timelessness. Hour of the Witch is set in 1662. But when a magistrate on the Court of Appeals says to Mary, "You are a nasty woman," that reference won't be lost.
Right.
By readers.
Right.
When readers are reading Eternal and they see the rise of fascism, they're going to think, we saw this in America in 2015, 2016, on January 6, 2021.
Well, it's so interesting, because I think you're very kind to say that, when I think you do so well in Hour of the Witch, is that you create this domestic situation, and just speaking for a minute as a modern sensibility, it does feel timeless, and you also didn't apply the modern sensibility to it. For example, it is drenched. I loved everything about this book, and we haven't even gotten to that. It's really kind of a genre bender. It's a love story. It's a drama. It's a domestic drama. It has two trials in it, not just one, but I don't want to give anything away, which is, I'm a lawyer. I've written trial scenes. I've tried cases.
The best.
It's so realistic.
The best.
It's so realistic. And I was on the edge of my seat. I couldn't put it down. And I think is the point I'm trying to make is that although there's a timelessness, there's so much specificity to it. And let's talk about that, because I saw that you mentioned that in an interview, for example, the way that the characters speak, I loved. And the same thing with respect to the domestic violence. And I want to sort of point this out, because I want people to understand that you are an incredible author. You are one of my favorites. Your touch is deft. There is nothing about this that you go, that's too much. Like, you don't shy away, but you do not pile it on. And that is not an easy task either. Let's talk about that for a minute. How did you do that so well? We feel for her, you see what he does, but you can still read it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give the wrong idea to
No.
It's not replete with domestic violence. It just isn't.
No. I mean, I know there's one of the things, and I am going to answer that question, but that really struck me when I was researching this novel is that, and it surprised the heck out of me, and it comes back to the dread and the domestic violence. The Puritans had atrocious table manners. I mean, they really did. First of all, they drank beer like it's spring break in Miami. They had plates for formal occasions, but usually they were eating out of trenchers.
Yeah, I
Imagine
had
many
no idea. I learned
cups.
so much about this era that was fascinating.
And they didn't use forks, which were just beginning to gain favor in Europe. Why did they not use the fork? Because it looks like a pitchfork. It looks like what they called the devil's tines. So here's what you got. A bunch of Puritans drunk on beer, eating out of trenchers like pigs, not using forks, and chances are they're eating the Puritan equivalent of bologna, lobsters. You just reach into the back bay and grab a lobster the size of a poodle. And that was dinner. And that's how they ate. So, dread, forks. One of the most obscure details that fascinated me was the idea that forks scared the hell out of them. You're always looking for signs of the devil. You're always looking for signs of Satan. And all of a sudden, Mary Deerfield's father is importing these forks. So, what is the ultimate act of violence? Imagine taking a fork and using it as a weapon. And it is when Thomas uses a fork on Mary Deerfield that I think the novel takes off. When he attacks her with a fork, she realizes her life is in danger and this marriage cannot stand. And so she is going to do something so rare and try and divorce her husband, even if it means, much to her horror, allegations of witchcraft.
Right. And it's so fascinating because I love that I feel for her so much. And part of the reason is also that you don't give her, to your credit, a soft place to land. For example, let's talk about her family for a minute, because, if you were being abused, you would you want to turn to your mom or your dad. Let's talk about that family, because I thought it really reinforced the narrative in a way that felt so genuine and authentic.
Yeah. Her mother and father want the marriage to work. They want it to work because they're good Puritans. And one of the things they know as Puritans is that the Lord God gave humans dominion over the animals and man dominion over woman. That was the belief. Secondly, they have 3 children, but their 2 sons, they're back in England, successfully building their business careers. And third, their only daughter is married to a reputable, established, successful man. Yes, he is twice her age, but it seems like a good fit. Now, the fact that they've been married 5 years, she's 24 years old, and she hasn't conceived a child, is a further indication to her parents that, well, maybe she's barren. Maybe this is God's punishment, and maybe Thomas Deerfield is as good as it gets. He already has a prior family from his first wife who's died. So let's get through this. Let's let her not be hanged as a witch. Let's let the divorce play itself out. And if she's sent back to her husband, fine. They're not bad people.
Right.
But they're people of their era.
Exactly.
I mean, they are fine. They take their daughter in during the trial. But they also know what it means to be a single woman divorced in Boston in 1662. Every day, across from Boston's brand new townhouse is the hanging platform, is the living platform, is
and the stocks.
stocks. Yeah, I mean, today we have Twitter, but they have the stocks.
Right. And I want to take a second to go back to the atmosphere, because I love books so much. And what I love so much about this book is that you become lost in it. You take us into that world. Talk to me about, I love the language. Things are of wicked design, and there's monkshood, and herbs are simples. And first off, how did you learn all that stuff? And how great to the effect in the novel. It suffuses this. It creates a whole world, or recreates, I guess.
Again, I have to give a shout out to Eternal, because whether I'm in an Italian restaurant, which can no longer get the goods it's used to getting because it's a war in 1942, or I'm watching young people ride their bicycles, or I'm watching Partisans in 1944, you built this magnificent, authentic, deeply moving world, the world on the precipice.
Well, that's very kind of you. But how did you do it in Hour of the Witch? Which was our country. Yeah. It's so amazing. I mean, I've obviously been to Boston a million times. How did this happen? What was it like?
There's so many small details with the Puritans I love, not just the forks, or the fact that, their table manners were abysmal. But I just love the small details that a lot of the wealthier houses had 2 floors, but no stairways. You got to the 2nd floor via a ladder. Or the fact that there were no coat hangers. There were pegs. Imagine that. You'd come in from the cold and you'd hang your cloak and your jacket on a peg. And of course, there's no electric lighting. So, in December, you've got a limited amount of tallow. You go to bed early.
Yeah.
It's a world of claustrophobia.
Yes.
And it's a world that has 2 dichotomous elements. On the one hand, it's exploding in population. The docks, every day, the ships are coming from Europe or from the West Indies with Madeira. And oh my God, when the ships with the Madeira arrived, every day there's the ships with the furniture more elegant than can be built now in Boston or Salem or Maine. But you go beyond the neck that attaches to the mainland, and you got a few groups of what they called the praying Indians, but then you have the woods and the forest, and it's dark and it's scary. And it's not scary because of the indigenous people. It would get scary because of the indigenous people in 20 years, during King Philip's War. But in the 1660s, it's scary because of Satan, because of the devil. I mean, when the Puritans and the Pilgrims arrived in 1620 and 1630, there are diary entries from women on the boats looking at the shore. And remember, these are city folk. These are city folk from London or from the Netherlands. And they're watching the rolling dunes and on Cape Cod and thinking, no, I don't want to get off this boat. The land is moving. It was terrifying.
Yeah, it was so amazing how you took us there. I loved all the wharf scenes. I also thought it was really interesting, the interplay of the natural world, the source for Mary of she relates to it, but also it's the source of various herbs and also poisons. That research must have been something else altogether. It was fascinating to me.
Yep.
How did you do that?
I know, the poisons began, wolfsbane. It's not called peoplebane. It's used to poison animals. Or in some cases, it's used to bring down deer. But because, they're Puritans, I shouldn't say that. I mean, the Europeans were great with poison too. But they figured out that these poisons had human uses as well, including, yes, Mary Deerfield, when the walls are closing in.
What I thought was so cool about, we're not giving anything away, is that you really, let's talk for a minute about these themes of what is justice, because Mary has very clear moral parameters about what is the difference between justice and revenge and law, God, what is left to God, what is left to Satan. All of these are part and parcel, throughout, without being, now we're going to talk about this theme. She has a view, correct? She has a view about what is justice in any given situation. This is a person who goes through 2 trials. We understand very quickly the incredible legal details you have, but also the difference between law and justice in the 1600s in Boston.
Yep. And, the Puritans viewed marriage as a civil covenant. It's why divorce was allowed, and it's why it happened 31 times. And if a woman successfully divorced her man, she received 1/3 of the estate. I'm not saying 1/3 is fair, but it's more than I expected of Puritan culture.
I learned so much about that from this. I was really surprised by so much. In a way, their thinking was oddly enlightened. At the same time, it was so oppressive.
Yes,
really
that is so beautifully put.
Thank you. I just was like, this is incredible. When you brought it out, was your idea. I'm like, holy God, this is really an interesting notion.
But, Mary's no pushover. Going back to your question about justice. She knows that, and, she's like any good Puritan, unbelievably fluent in the Bible. She understands that man has dominion over women, but man does not have dominion over women to beat her. I mean, the first 40 pages of the book, Mary is constantly worried about her coif and the bruises on the side of her face.
Yes, will the bruises show?
Yeah, because, her husband is so clever, so horribly, horribly clever, that he knows where to beat her so it won't be seen.
Right. It's so heartbreaking. You feel her shame, you feel her fear, you feel her dread in church, elsewhere. It's just remarkable.
She reaches a point where she knows this will not stand. You do not have the right to hit me. You do not have the right to throw me into the hearth. You do not have the right to plunge a fork into my hand. This will not stand.
Right. And she stands up for herself.
Risks everything to try and escape, knowing that these 14 men are going to be sort of, looking at her as if it's a, without naming names, a Supreme Court hearing in America a couple of years ago.
right? And you really see through the trials, everything, how she perseveres and what she does. And we can't give anything away. And I see we're kind of running low on time because we do want to there's so much to talk about in a book I just loved and adored so much. I think everybody should get it. You should get it tonight, because I have to tell you, I just think it is just sensational. I just think it is just one of our finest writers in this country at the top of his superpowers. So
And the same can be said of Lisa Scottoline and
So
Eternal, one of America's great writers at the top of her game, suddenly writing this unbelievably powerful book about World War II.
Well, you are too kind. And let's turn it back to our hostesses to field questions and stuff, because we are not trusted to do such things. But I really am so in love with this book, and I just love you, Chris, as does everybody. I mean,
Right back at you, Lisa. I love you too, and I love your work so much.
thank you. This has just been an absolute pleasure. So let's hear the questions. I can't wait to hear the answers.
Okay, oh my gosh, that was great, great, great. And Lisa, if you want to jump in, if you have another question, just jump right in.
Okay, let's hear what people want.
Questions about the research. What did you have to do? Where did you have to go? How long did it take you?
Well, I studied Puritan theology in college. And I've moved in my adult life. I'm not a young man. But only 2 sets of books from college are still with me. My Russian literature and my books on Puritan theology. Because if anyone understood the anxiety of being a Puritan, it's me. I mean, my self-loathing is off the charts. My anxiety is off the charts. I mean, no one second-guesses him or herself other than the Puritans more than me. So I had all of those books. But it's from those books that I found my books on witchcraft. Whether it's, my favorite book on witchcraft, Carol Garlson's The Devil in the Shape of a Woman. Bonus points for the title alone. The Devil in the Shape of a Woman. Or all of the other books on witchcraft in America, they were key. But also this. The Colonial Society of America has voluminous articles in first-person sources. The Puritans were avid diary keepers, avid ledger keepers, because they were constantly asking themselves, am I saved or damned? And I have to give a shout out to a wonderful Vermont guy named L. Kinvin Roth. Now President Emeritus, Dean Emeritus at Vermont Law School. He is one of the country's great scholars on Puritan civil litigation. I give him a call, I shoot him an email, and 10 minutes later, he'd send me a link or a PDF he had of some obscure article about a trial from 1681, or an academic study of divorce from, 2002 about 17th century American divorce. And it was instrumental. I mean, if you look at the back of Eternal, or you read Eternal, you see that Lisa did the same kind of homework. Lisa does what she does, I do what I do, because of historians. We depend on historians.
So that's pretty cool, though. I mean, to be able to have all of that information. So we have another question. What sets your story apart from other abusive marital relationship books?
Okay, first of all, I've written 22 books, and this is my second book about domestic violence. Secrets of Eden in 2010 is set in the present, and it's all about domestic violence in Vermont. Became a lovely movie with John Stamos, Anna Gunn from Breaking Bad. There are a lot of important books about domestic violence. Hour of the Witch is historical fiction. It's about Boston, 1662. Domestic violence is the trigger. But as Lisa said so eloquently, it's courtroom dramas about civil litigation and, well, criminal litigation. Among the capital crimes for the Puritans, adultery and witchcraft. An Hour of the Witch is the nexus of adultery, divorce, and witchcraft.
So I have to throw in a question that I'm dying to know. So the book, there are 2 books within the book. Did you start off doing it that way, or did that just how it ended up? Because it's brilliant how you did it.
Yep, the 2 books are book 1 or part 1, the Book of the Wife, and part 2 or book 2, the Book of the Witch. Now, originally it was just part 1 and part 2. It was a novel. But when I was really examining the book, I realized it's the Book of the Wife and the Book of the Witch. So I changed it. Now, when I was writing the book, I had no idea where it's going. I never do. I have a vague premise, and then I depend on my characters to take me by the hand and lead me through the dark of the story. This began with a vague premise. Puritan woman, a saint, a member of the church, is fed up and sues her husband for divorce, and it devolves quickly into a witch trial. That's all I knew. But all my books are like that. When I began The Flight Attendant, all I knew was this. Alcoholic, hot mess of a flight attendant wakes up next to a dead body in Dubai, the guy she picked up the night before from 2C. When I began The Red Lotus, all I knew was this. New York City ER doctor goes on a bike tour of Vietnam with her new boyfriend, and he disappears. And she discovers that everything he told her was a lie. That's all I know when I begin a book.
So the language of the period, was it hard to write in that period?
I had 2 sources. I told you about Anne Bradstreet. The other, the King James Bible.
Oh, wow.
Say what you will about all of the appalling stuff in the Bible, whether it's unbelievably despicable admonishments against homosexuality, or really, really creepy stories about incest, or God deciding, I'm pissed, I'm going to obliterate the planet. The language is beautiful. I mean, the 23rd Psalm is one of the most beautiful poems written of the era. Whether you're an atheist or you take the Bible at face value, the King James Version is beautiful. And so my rhythmic touchstones were the poetry of Anne Bradstreet and the King James Bible. Thy, thou, thine, dost, hast. Yeah, it might take you 6 pages to get used to it. But all of the preliminary readers have said to me, oh my God, I love the language. No one has said to me, I put this book down because of the word thou.
It was beautiful. I loved the language. So I always love to ask about the title, because Lisa, we were talking before everybody came on about the title and that moment in the book. And Lisa, I had the same reaction that you did. So Chris, when did the title come to you? Or was it always Hour of the Witch?
The title came to me when my brilliant editor said, Jenny Jackson said, okay, it's time. We need a title. And I had a lot of previous titles. The Trials of Mary Deerfield, The Devil's Times. And my editor, who is so much smarter than I am, said the magic word is witch. You need a title with witch in it. And that's when the title was born.
So now we have another question about, did you know what the ending was going to be? Did you know, you say how you start with the idea, but when did you get the ending?
I had no idea about the ending when I started the book. For all I knew, I didn't know how either trial would end. I didn't know whether Mary Deerfield, and I'm not going to reveal this, would be 6 feet under at the end of the book or breathing. And I'm, not going to tell you. But when I'm about 3/4 of the way into a book, when the book is saying to me, you kind of need to end it, Bohjalian. You're not Tolstoy. No one wants a 1,000-page book by Chris Bohjalian. Just no one. I get out these 3 big whiteboards, and they're in this room. And I put them on the bookshelves. And in 3 different colored markers, dry erase, black, red, and blue, I plot out character arcs. What happens if this character dies? What happens if this character dies? Okay, if this character dies, what was her motivation? If this character lives, what's the motivation? And I'm always thinking in an ending Aristotelian. What Aristotle meant was this: an ending is perfect if it does 2 things. If it, 1, leaves the reader utterly surprised, and B, saying, I can't imagine the book ending any other way. You can write a book that's magnificent for 400 pages. But if the last 20 stink, it's like a gymnast's floor routine. 2 minutes and 55 seconds are great, but you tumbled on the landing. You have to stick the landing. And I've written 22 books. Sometimes I stick the landing and sometimes I wobble.
So now, do you ever go back and read your books? And if you do you ever want to change anything?
The only time I reread my books, and thank you, Netflix, HBO Max, Hulu, it's because either I'm adapting one or someone else is adapting one for a TV series. So, I've gone back and reread Skeletons at the Feast, The Guest Room, The Red Lotus, The Flight Attendant. And I always see things that make me think, wow, you really could have done that better. Or, wow, what were you thinking?
That's cool to know. So now, is there a character in Hour of the Witch that surprised you, that just came out of nowhere?
There are 2, but I'm not going to tell you their names because it would be a spoiler.
Can you at least maybe describe or how you think they came into being?
No, but I will tell you a funny story about another character, just because I don't want to be unbelievably, no, I will not answer a question. One of my favorite characters in the book is named Peregrine. And Peregrine is a great Puritan name, but in my case, this is what happens in a pandemic. She is named after the Appalachian Distillery's Peregrine Gin. I was having a Negroni with Peregrine Gin, and I was looking at the bottle and I thought, damn, Peregrine, that is a hell of a name. I'm going to give a character the name Peregrine.
And I have to say, now I'm so glad that you said that, because I wondered reading it. I'm like, okay, this is such an unusual name. I'm so glad, because I was going to ask how you came up with that name.
Yep. Yep.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I think every good book needs to have a character named after booze.
I might agree with you. So we have another question. How do you organize your research?
I'm going to show you. Come with me. We are walking across my library, and I don't know if you can see the books, can you?
Yeah.
These are some of my books that were instrumental in writing this particular novel. I also have notebooks and folders. I don't use index cards. I don't have a research assistant, but all of those books I just showed you are filled with Post-it notes. I've got diaries that are absolutely filled with notes that I took. And I'm not alone. I mean, if you look at the acknowledgments of Lisa's unbelievably fantastic Eternal, you will literally see pages, 4 pages of acknowledgments with those books that she recommends and those books that were instrumental in the creation of her magnificent, unbelievably authentic world. I mean, I can't say enough good things about this novel.
Okay, can I have a little fun with both you and Lisa? Because as a bookseller, I have about 10 seconds to sell a book. So if Lisa will do this, I'm gonna have Lisa sell Hour of the Witch. And then Chris, you can sell Eternal.
Okay.
So your booksellers, you have all of these people, you have 10 seconds each to sell the other's book. So Lisa, why don't we start with you?
I think Hour of the Witch is the best book I've read in a long, long time. And it is the story of one woman's struggle to find her voice and free herself against almost impossible odds.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're very welcome.
Okay, Chris, go ahead.
Eternal, among the most beautiful books ever written about the Second World War. 3 young adults who are going to break your heart, and you're going to be turning the pages till 4 a.m. because you just care about them so freaking much.
Aww. And I want to add something about Chris's book too, because I was muted before. I think what you said about the ending is so important. And just as a novelist, I really look at endings. I care a lot about, I know it's hard. And I write like you, I don't know what's going to happen at the end either. And I really thought this book not only plunged us into this maelstrom of this oppressive society and her very personal struggle, but it twisted and turned, and I could not figure out how it was going to end. And it paid off, as we say. So you felt your heart open up, and you were it just was a emotional release. And it was, as you said, it was Aristotelian. It was just everything. It was everything it could have been. And I remember writing you, this is my fan letter then when I read it. And I wrote, I was blown the F away. And that's to find a novel that will really, Stephen Sondheim says, surprise me. And that a work of art can surprise you. And at the end, be so surprising and yet so amazingly satisfying. That's why it's one of the myriad of reasons why Hour of the Witch is so incredible. And I just love it. And I hope everybody gets it. You really should. You'll love it. You will not be able to put it down.
Thank you, Lisa. You're amazing. I bow
Congratulations.
before
What
you.
an accomplishment. What an accomplishment. And thanks to RJ Julia and BookHampton for having this tonight. This is a really special night, and I'm so proud to be a part of your launch.
I am so glad you're here.
And I just want to thank, just like Lisa, I just want to thank everyone so much at RJ Julia and BookHampton. The last 14 months have been the year that Satan spawned. But somehow, day after day, booksellers masked up, figured out curbside delivery, figured out protocols, and brought us books. I mean, you might all have PTSD forever, but I thank you. I mean, by the time this is done,
Right.
the equivalent of the population of the state of Vermont will be dead. I cannot get over that number.
No.
And when I look at booksellers at RJ Julia and BookHampton, I just think, dear God, thank you for being strong and courageous.
And to readers too. I don't know about you, Chris, but I've read more in the past year than I ever have. And I feel like that's what's magical about books, that if you write something really honest and true, regardless of whether it's set in Boston or anything, you just tell a really personal, meaningful story. It can fill someone else's soul and nurture them during a really difficult time. I really felt like Hour of the Witch did that. I feel like the best of our books do that. And thanks to all the readers who supported us in these stores and to these incredible bookstores that have been just defying odds every day to take care of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. You're amazing.
You are, Chris, I love and adore you. I can't wait to meet you actually in person and your beautiful family.
I can't wait to either. We'll have a dog play date.
Yes, we will, on bicycles.
On bicycles.
Ladies and gentlemen, oh my gosh, we have just been totally privileged here tonight with these two spectacular authors. We are so lucky and so blessed. Oh my gosh, Chris. I mean, honestly, I broke a few people's legs to be able to be sitting here, tonight. So I thank everybody for letting me do this, but Chris, thank you. And Lisa, thank you you were spectacular. You both were amazing. So thank you.
We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, everybody.
Both on. So everybody, they are two of the best books of the year. So buy them both. The links are in the chat. So thank you, everybody. Have a fabulous evening. We'll see you at
Congratulations, Chris.
Congratulations, Lisa.
See you on the road.